This is the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. If you're looking to generate wealth and passive income in the lucrative world of mobile home parks, you're in the right place. You'll discover solutions to the common legal and operational pitfalls and how to optimize parks to maximize income. Your host is in the trenches. He's a real estate attorney, financial analyst, and mobile home park investor and operator. Now, let's turn it over to Ferd Neiman.
Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd Neiman here again today with another episode of the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast. Got another great guest for you today. He's got an interesting perspective. He still has a full-time W-2 job, Fortune 30 company. He'll tell us more about that, but he's been able to build his mobile home park portfolio at the same time. So a unique perspective. Please help me welcome my guest, Shawn Dwyer. Shawn, thanks for coming on, man.
Absolutely, Ferd. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
You got it. Well, tell us your background and tell us how you got into MHP and how you juggle both the job and investment portfolio, and we'll go from there.
Sounds great. So yeah, I got started into MHP investing, started deep diving into it about 3 years ago, believe it or not. So started during COVID times. I personally was tired of seeing my 401k just drop by like 30% every couple of years. It happened in 08, 09 over the course of multiple years. And then COVID over the course of a couple of months, you take a pretty big hit, 30, 35% over a short period of time. I'm starting to think like, okay, this is great. You have a 401k, you have a nest egg that's there. What happens in 20, 30 years when I'm ready to retire and something happens and it drops by 30, 40%? I need some additional alternatives. I need some other avenues for income, potentially even passive income. So started listening to a bunch of podcasts, reading tons of books, and just kind of fell into the mobile home park space. Started doing some underwriting of deals. And I don't know what happened when I first started listening to the podcast when they came out in like 2016, downloading some old versions, started looking at them in 2020, and wow, the prices jumped.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, partnered, got a hold of Ryan and Ian as part of their mentorship program. So I started doing that. They started setting me up with how to do cold calls, how to set up lists, how to do cold calling, direct mail marketing, meeting with owners, meeting with brokers, and just trying to get into the industry with that. So that's how I broke into it. It took a long time. It took over a year from initial deciding to get into mobile home park investing to actually closing on my first.
Yeah, your story is not unlike a lot of others where, it's not easy to jump in. And I'll be curious here in a minute to hear your perspective on the passive versus active piece, because I know for me, I thought it was a passive investing. And there's some parks there's some parks you can operate in 4 hours a week, but there are certainly some that you need to operate considerably more, and even more than you can handle yourself. You need to have a team. So different perspective, depending on the individual park. Each one is its own animal. So when you jumped in the space, did you have a specific type you were looking for? I mean, by the nature of having a regular full-time job, did you specifically pursue a park without park-owned homes or without vacancy? Or tell us about that analysis.
Sure. So when you're looking, at least when I was looking at it, tenant-owned homes, park-owned homes, your park-owned homes are going to get a little bit more beat up. So I was looking more tenant-based, so that way I'm not dealing with the day-to-day water, sewer issues within the home, roof issues, leak issues. I don't have time to deal with that. So for me, it helped out with just narrowing the focus in the parks and communities that I was interested in. So looking ideally, if it's close to me outside of Philadelphia here, anywhere between 50 to 200, 250 lots is ideally what I would be looking for. Small value add, doing rent increases, either developing some additional land, moving in some homes to sell off the tenants. But the big heavy lifts of a park that's 20% occupied and water sewer issues, all park owned homes, I don't have the time to deal with that.
Yeah, understood. So with that target, and it's not a super narrow target, but it's not, I'll take anything, which is probably a good strategy. But with that narrow target, how did that impact your ability to find a deal, especially your first deal when you didn't have a relationship with a particular lender or broker? I know a lot of my clients will say, like, I can't get the first deal bought. And I'm like, unfortunately, sometimes what people are having to do is they're paying up a little bit for the first deal, or they're taking a deal with more hair on it. And if you're specifically wanting a deal that doesn't have hair on it, then you got to pay. A lot of times you got to find either A, find a diamond in the rough, or B, you pay up a little. So next time you call that broker, you can say, hi, I'm calling to expand my existing mobile home park portfolio. And then they might actually return your phone call.
Yep.
How was that experience for you?
Yeah, so for me, a lot of the broker listings are great, but they just don't really pencil out for the returns that I'd be looking for or to give to my friends and family. So for me, it was just building that off-market database, calling, cold calling, direct mail marketing, existing owners and operators, and just building that relationship over time. It's not done overnight. It took many, many, many months of connecting with them, going to drive through the parks, talking to them, providing offers, them declining, and then finally getting one under contract. Had a lot of others under contract, almost half a dozen, but ultimately, as we started to dig into it, due diligence, zoning, permitting, sewer issues, there's a lot of things that just happen over the course of getting parks under contract, at least LOI, before PSA phase, but then having to drop out, unfortunately.
And how big of a radius from your home base did you look at the beginning? I mean, was it within 100 miles, or were you willing to look at something remote, 2 states over, where you may need a manager?
Yeah, ideally within a 4-hour drive is what I was looking for. But now, the first one purchased and owning and operating about 2.5 hours or 3 hours is a pretty decent driving distance for what I could do, after hours, nights, weekends sort of thing. If I had to go physically on site, anything longer, it's just not able to maintain ownership of and
Uh,
be that really that on the ground if needed or required.
In your first park, did you manage it yourself, or did you have an on-site part-time or full-time manager?
Yeah, so we have an on-site manager that we had from the previous owner. She took over a lot of the day-to-day responsibilities. So that's what we did for that one. For my first park, I actually did a partnership with Julio Jaramillo out of Evergreen.
Okay.
So yeah, so he has a great team of regional folks all around the country. So if there's something that needs to be addressed or done during the day and I'm just not able to do it, his team can handle that. But yeah, I'm always available nights, weekends.
Great. Yeah, we've had Julio on the show before as well. He's a great guy. He's fun to talk to and fun to watch. So he's been real successful. So it's good you got to work with him on that deal.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's very passionate. We go out and do site walks every year to the communities that we own and operate. And he goes to every single one of his properties and very passionate and loves talking to all the residents and trying to help them out in any way he can.
That's great. So what would you say is your best lessons learned from your first park? And did you make any mistakes that you have been able to fix on future parks, or did you have enough analysis and due diligence in the front end that you've been able to avoid mistakes even from the beginning?
Yeah, we no mistakes currently on the park that we're currently owning and operating. Everything's going pretty smoothly. Just I guess the only lesson learned is just contractors, right? So luckily this area is pretty good, relatively dense. So we have a pretty good pool of contractors, but yeah, I don't know how folks can manage parks that are very, very, very remote. If you have, a small pool of residents, small pool of contractors that you're working with, luckily we have some really great contractors that we were able to snag and talk with other park owners in the area that put us in contact with them.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I've had some luck and some misfortune in the past on, obviously if you go to a town of 8,000 people, you can expect to have a harder time finding contractors than, a town of, 1 million people. But I've even had it where I've had, reasonable sized metros, 120, 150,000 people. And depending on that part of the country, it's like you can't find people who want to work, or you can't find people who want to work at even a sensible price. And I've even had it where like these are professional contractors. Had one particular, we had like 10 professional contractors bid out these mobile homes, and I think we had 8 or 9 at the time. So like 8 homes remodeled. Like, look, this is a lot of work. It's not coming to town. I think this is we even had a guy that did like Hardee's or Taco Bell or something that had a down period. So look, if you give me something in the next 90 days, my crew is here, we'll renovate them. I'm like, great. We've got 8 mobile homes that need total remodels, and they never gave us a bid. We
Yeah.
call them back like, hey, what's the story? You said you'd give us a bid by Friday. Some of them said, oh, sorry, I'm a couple days behind. Some of them never responded. And at the end, I had 10 contractors and guys with, their name on the side of their truck and business card and website. Like, okay, these guys are going to give me the bids. This is a reliable company. And they just ghosted you. So we ended up having to train, hire in guys, in-house in other locations and just send them on the road and just, hey, you're out of town for a week, 2 weeks, come back for 2 days, go back for 2 weeks and repeat. And that is not an ideal way to renovate homes. And just, really intensive from an oversight perspective, lots of travel cost, hotel cost, but sometimes that's what you got to do. So definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, we're even doing some work in the community to make it a lot more pleasant, more appealing. So we're putting in driveways to all the the homes eventually. So we're going to be doing it in multiple phases. But yeah, to your same point, just calling these contractors, look, we have, X amount that we're trying to do this year. You have another 40 or 50 that we'll be doing next year. And then just getting people just to give you quotes and just respond back to you is sometimes impossible.
It's definitely one of the more frustrating pieces of management is finding people that want to work. I'm like, I'm willing to pay the market price. Sometimes the market price is expensive. It's like, look, why are you guys not doing this? But yeah, it's just the nature of the world we live in, and then from a geographic standpoint, it's sometimes worse than you'd expect.
Absolutely.
So how are you finding deals now? What's this current market doing for you? Are you able to find sellers that are still motivated to sell, or people in your market still wanting the price from 2021 and you can't come to terms because you don't have 2021 interest rates?
Yeah. So when connecting with mom and pop owners, yeah, it's the same. They've heard, last couple of years of what their park's worth, and they're kind of holding out for that number and that price. Even if I'll just do basic math with them and say, here's what you're telling me you bring in, here's what I would have to pay for a brand new interest rate at that price. Like your park I would be underwater. So they're like, yep, don't care. That's the price I want.
That's how it goes. Like, well, you approached me. I wasn't going to sell. If you want to pay my price, then I'll sell. And it's frustrating. So what percentage of sellers are you seeing that are open to discussion versus, unwilling to discuss at all, and then are just completely unreasonable? And have you found any ways to bridge that gap, seller finance or anything else?
Yeah, not yet. So most of the owners, they typically just want to sell. They don't want to finance it over the course of time, at least the ones that I've met and I've talked to. So I ideally would love to get some bridge the gap from what they're currently operating today, and then ultimately with the sales price that they want, and we could refinance into. But yeah, still just some lofty goals and objectives from existing mom and pop owners.
Yeah, and a lot of people when they get started, they do similar tactics as far as trying to contact mom and pop directly. Um, Out of every 10 you talk to, how many of them are you the first person that actually has reached them versus have they already heard a price from me and the next 9 guys?
Yeah, so all of them. Let me think. A lot of what I got is stop calling me. I wish people would just leave me alone. No, I'm not interested in selling. I'm leaving to my kids. So they get called all the time.
Yeah, that's kind of been my experience. I feel like the guys that you can reach and you can find, everybody else has already found too. And you just got to get lucky. I mean, we bought a deal in St. Louis one time that we just reached out to the guy. He answered, he gave us a reasonable price. We said okay. We closed the deal, and then we posted about the deal on LinkedIn after we closed it, and like 10 people said, "Oh my gosh, I've been bugging that guy." And a couple people were offering a bigger price. A couple people couldn't get a price out of him. And in hindsight, it was a relatively low price. It was a really good deal for us. But apparently the day we called, it wasn't like we sweet talked him. The day we called, he's like, "Yeah, I think I'd sell." And somebody else called him, maybe not the day before, but 3 months before. So you just don't ever know.
Yeah.
I had one recently that I followed up with. It just hit me one day. I was like, we never called that person back, and I should have. We had an LOI with them, and I want to say it was like 850,000, and the park was a bargain. So I mean, I would have easily paid over $1 million for it, but that was the price they asked for. Like, oh, I bought it for 750 10 years ago, so I want to make some money. I'll take 850. We're like, yeah, we can make that work. Well, then we ended up sending them the contract, and their lawyer redlined it. We agreed to the red line changes, and then their CPA killed the deal. CPA said, "Where are you going to replace this money? How are you going to, how much tax you have to pay on all this?" So we tried to do seller finance or other options. And this woman just said, "No, I'm not interested." Well, then I thought about it like 2 weeks ago. I was like, that was like 2 years ago. I wonder what she's up to. She's like, she kind of said like, "I'm never going to sell based on what my CPA told me. I'll never sell." So I reached back out to her, and she got back to me the next day and said, "We no longer own this. We sold it a year ago." I'm like, why would you not call me? I'm like, "How much did you sell it for?" I'm just like, oh, so it just, proves to me again, like you got to follow up, you got to stay on it. And somebody else called her on a luckier day than I did. And I called on a bad day and somebody else called on a better day. Just,
Yeah. A lot of it's honestly, it's timing. I think it's just getting the right person on the phone at the right time. There's been times where I'll call people the first time and they're ready to talk, ready to sell. There's other times where I'll follow up with people for the last couple of years and they're probably going to leave it to their kids, but I'll still follow up with them. They're great people to talk to. So yeah, it's a numbers game, it seems like.
Yeah, it's a combination of effort, numbers, luck, build relationship, all that. There's a guy in my hometown. He lived in the park. He was very successful and wealthy. He had a bunch of farm ground. He had a construction business, and then he lived in the park and had a really nice looking park. He didn't focus on it that much because of his other needs and desires, I guess. But he had a rent box, and he said, "Put the rent in the box." And on his door it said, "Don't bug me, don't knock, don't call." And we bought the park, and we got access to the rent box. There were months and months of checks that had just been piled up in there. It's in front of his door. He didn't even take the checks out. There was a check in there for, I want to say it was 65,000. It was 35,000 for somebody had dropped him off a check for something else, for like his concrete business or something. And we got the box, and we called him like, "Hey man, you got a check in here for 65,000. He lived at this point, 45 minutes away. He goes, "Okay, next time I'm in town, I'll reach out to you." It was like a month and a half later. He's like, "You still got that check?" I'm like, "You got a $65,000 check. You're not that worried about it?" Well, anyway, this guy was really hard to reach. He was really grumpy. And I walked on site with him, and it was like, I thought it was gonna be like a 20-minute walk. And we ended up sitting outside for like 3 hours, and it was like 10 degrees outside. And we were just frozen. And he just chain smoking cigarettes right in my face, one after the other, one after the other. But we finally got the data out of him. How many of these homes are actually occupied? What's the actual rent? And my dad had been bugging this guy like every 3 to 6 months for 5 years. And I'm like, nobody's buying, nobody's getting this guy. He's not answering the phone call. So he was a mom and pa, but he had a 90 space park with concrete roads, double wides with gazebos and garages and driveways. Like, it was a really nice park. And he wasn't an economics major, so we were able to get it at a price that was really attractive to us because we weren't really competing with anybody. And I bet people have been calling him. There's not that many 50 space parks left. This was a 90 space park, plus it had storage units. All the lots were nice. I mean, it was a really nice park, and we just kept trying, and we got somewhat lucky, but somewhat effort, where nobody was getting lucky straight up calling this guy because he wouldn't even return the phone calls for his tenants. Wouldn't even cash their checks, right? So
It's amazing.
yep.
Good job.
Yeah, thanks. You got any interesting stories on dealing with this seller? Anything, any way you've bonded with them that's special, or any way that they've told you to blow off that is entertaining?
Yeah, no. So for this seller, again, just trying to build up rapport with this individual. I asked if there were any other parks that we were under contract for, weren't interested in. Would you be interested in purchasing it? He said, maybe. So build up a relationship with him. There was another off-market broker listing, kind of wholesale deal that was down in Baltimore area. So we weren't interested in it due to the price and NOI that we were getting for it. So reach out to the owner, said, "Hey, there's this other deal that's currently off market. Do you want me to put you in contact with the broker or wholesaler?" He said, "Yeah, sure." So after that period of time, he always just returned my calls. So trying to find other deals for him that didn't work for us. He's built a pretty good relationship over the course of 12 to 18 months.
And that's the guy that you purchased from.
Correct. Yeah.
Interesting. I've never tried that. I guess I'd be a little afraid of the deal that you thought was too expensive, being like, "Hey, you should talk to this broker," and then you like reset his price expectations. Some roll of the dice there, but you built rapport, so that was worth it.
Yeah, I just figured, he's not really returning my calls all the time. So if I can just start building a relationship with him, almost peer to peer, maybe could get a pretty good deal from him over the course of time. He's ever interested in selling.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I have a guy I recently spoke with that I met probably 4 or 5 years ago, who owns 4 or 5 parks within about an hour of my house. And so I was like, I'd really like to. And he's an older guy. He's in his 80s. So I don't know if he has children or anything like that. I've forgotten if he's told me, but I talked to him again recently, and he's like, "Yeah, I remember you. You're a quality guy. I enjoyed our discussions. You're at the top of the list when I'm ready to sell." So I was like, "Okay, great." I don't know when he's going to sell and if he's ever going to sell, but it's like, it gives me some hope that he's going to fall in my lap. We had another seller that we were really close to selling with. We had an LOI and he would never sign the contract. And I'm like, I don't want to sue the guy over this, but he just said, I'm not ready yet. Family issues, health of my parents, and you're the only guy I'm talking to. And I can assure you, when somebody else says, will you sell your park? I say, I've already got a guy. So, right. And I'm believing him and trusting him. And we've tried like crazy to, to restructure it differently or do this timing differently, or, seller finance this piece or that piece, let him reinvest here. He can keep the homes and I'll take the park, or I'll take both, or some combination. And we've not been able to get him over the hump, but continue to reach out to him and continue to, let him know we exist, especially after that other recent one where the person told me they already sold it. I was like, good grief. I literally made you an offer 100% of your asking price. Why would you not have called me when you decided you were ready to sell? But they didn't even try to get me to bid it up on the other guy, nothing. So just goes to show that you got to be persistent and be top of mind.
Absolutely. Yeah. There was a handwritten letter that I wrote to a seller that lived pretty close to my house, nice little 50 space park. Said, hey, if you're ever interested in selling, want to talk, want to meet up, give me a call. Well, he called me, built a little bit of a relationship over the course of the month. And he ultimately wanted to sell to somebody else, even though I gave him an offer that was, I think it was 250K higher.
Wow.
So he's like, not really interested. I said, look, partnering with Julio on it. I said, look, there's my business partner. We can give you names of all these other purchasers, mom and pop owners that we've worked with, brokers, whoever you need. He's like, no, I'm just busy. I don't want to call him. But yeah, I was like, you could make another $250,000 just by calling one person or multiple people just as references. And he didn't want to do it.
Wow. It's odd to find out. One time when I first started looking for parks in Kansas City, I picked the 50 closest mom and pa. There's a lot of institutional owners here, so I didn't really bug them. But that got me as far out as Atchison, Kansas, which is about 40 minutes away. And the 50 handwritten letters I sent, and then I followed up by calling them, many of whom I couldn't reach. But the only guy that called me was the guy from Atchison. And he called to say, hey, I just want to give you a courtesy call. I demoed my park 5 years ago. There's no park. Like, oh, I couldn't tell from the aerial from my list I hadn't driven it, obviously. But he called to tell me. I was just like, well, that was nice of you, but I wish somebody else would have called. But it didn't work out as well as I'd hoped. So
yeah, some mailers, I'll get people call me back saying, take me off your list. Don't send mail to me. Okay, I've never emailed or called any of the window people that are mailing me to buy stuff or get stuff from them, but the people are pretty passionate about not getting mail sometimes.
Right. Well, Shawn, what other tips or tricks or suggestions you have for our audience?
Yeah. So for anybody who's new to the space and looking to break in, to be honest with you, it takes time. It's not going to be your first cold call. It's not going to be your first direct mail message. It's not going to be the first LOI that you sent. Just keep calling, try to build relationships over the course of time, and eventually you will break into it. It might take a month, it might take a year, it might take 3 years, but eventually you will get there.
All right. Good stuff. Hey, where can people find you after this session here if they want to reach out to you, Shawn?
Absolutely. So feel free to go to my website, goldenoakrei.com, or you can email me directly, shawn.dwyer@goldenoakrei.com.
All right. Anything else, or we're going to call it a day?
No, that is it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
You got it. Thanks, Shawn. Take care.
You too.
You've been listening to the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. Ready to learn more? Go to www.themobilehomelawyer.com for free resources and materials to help you succeed. If you love the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, give us your review, and subscribe today. Thank you for listening. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri nor the Missouri Bar reviews nor approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.